Okay, so welcome back to week 3 of the Introduction to Fluid Mechanics course, and uh, let's just wait for 2 more minutes, I guess, and then we can continue our discussion. So wait for 2 more minutes. Okay, so just to give you a brief idea, uh, brief a brief overview. So in this week we will discuss about surface tension. So which would be, I think, one of the last introductory topics of uh, the fluid mechanics course. After that, all will be like mostly the analytical aspect of solving fluid mechanics problems, and so the topic of surface tension, I think, would be the last introductory concept of this fluid mechanics course. Okay, so we have dealt with the characteristic length scales, viscosity in the last week. So this week we are discussing about the surface tension. Okay, so I think we can start. So let us begin. So just to reiterate again, I will briefly, as all the previous weeks, I will briefly go through the concepts that were discussed by Professor Chakraborty in the lectures, and in order to save time, I think I won't dive deep into each and every concept, but still I will briefly go through the concept slowly, and if there is any doubt you might ask. If I'm able to clear that out there and there itself, I will be very happy to do that, but if I'm not able to do that, I will try to clarify it in the next week. Okay, so that's the overview of today's agenda, and then after that we will briefly go to some questions that are relevant to your assignment problems, and that will be helpful for your exams. Okay, so just to give you a idea, today's contents of discussion are a bit small, like there are only two topics: the hydrostatic law and the surface tension. So after that we'll quickly go through some questions. I think there are only 6 questions and you can try to solve it, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, so with that, let us start. So as I already mentioned, so this would be the last introductory concept of of this particular course, like basic terminologies. So we discussed about the characteristic length scales and the continuum hypothesis in the first lecture. Second lecture we discussed about the viscosity and its implications, and this week we are discussing about surface tension. So after that we will directly start with the fluid statics part, then fluid kinematics and fluid dynamics. This will be the chronology, and then we will continue. Okay, so let us just continue. So to start with, surface tension can be considered as a tendency of these fluid molecules to retain their shapes even in a scenario where where they have some net forces acting in a way that try to break their form or break their shape. Okay, for example, you might have heard about, Professor Chakraborty might have discussed about the cohesive and adhesive forces. So cohesive forces basically means the intermolecular forces of attraction between the fluid molecules, and adhesive forces are the attraction forces between the fluid molecules and the surface of the container in which the fluid has been kept. Okay, so the implication of surface tension and its utilities can be perceived by understanding the relation between these two types of forces. So when you see that in this example, for example, in this container there is a fluid has been kept, and for example this is a particular fluid molecule. Okay, so because of the fact that the lower surface of the fluid molecule is attached to the fellow fluid molecules, which tend to have a higher resultant force or higher net force compared to the forces of attraction between the fluid molecule and the air, because of which it will tend to break this shape of this particular molecule. Okay, so for example, if you consider that the net forces acting on this side is lower than the net forces acting on this side, so basically it will try to pull this molecule apart in a way that the molecule breaks apart. Okay, but still, by the virtue of a force that by virtue of a resultant, by virtue of a tendency, I must say, these molecules tend to retain their shape. Okay, so and this tendency or this energy by which they are able to retain its shape is known as surface energy, as is mentioned here. And the force, and this force acting per unit length is known as surface tension. Okay, so usually we define surface tension as a surface tension coefficient in some problems, and I will denote it as here as sigma, or in some textbooks they also use the symbol of gamma. Okay, so it's the according to the notation, but for me I will use sigma as the notation for the surface tension coefficient. Okay, so I just wanted to know this surface energy and surface tension coefficient, although they are a resultant of the same physical phenomenon, but they are two different terminologies. Okay, of course we can understand the unit itself. The surface energy unit, the surface energy will have a unit of joules, and surface tension coefficient will have a unit of force per unit length. Okay, as it's mentioned here. Then there was a brief discussion about the Young's equation. Okay, again I will not dive deep into it because there is no elaborate discussion on it, or the following derivation that has been that the following equations that have been derived by using Young's equation that has not been elaborately discussed, and it's not quite important for this particular course. That's why I will not dive deep into the concept of Young's equation. But basically, if you just wanted to know as a one-word answer, it's a relation between the surface tension, the forces arising from the surface tension effects. Okay, so there's basically a force balance acting on a particular fluid molecule because of the surface tension forces. Okay, so that's how we obtain this Young's equation. For example, if you just take an example of this liquid bubble, uh, liquid drop I must say in this case, resting on a particular surface. So let sigma ls be the surface tension coefficient between the liquid and solid interface. Sigma sv be the surface tension coefficient between the solid and the vapor interface, and sigma l be the surface tension coefficient along the liquid vapor interface. Okay, so if you just decompose these forces along the x and y components, you will see that, for example, if we do the force balance along the x direction, we will see that sigma ls plus sigma lv cos theta should be equal to sigma sv, or cos theta here in this case is sigma sv minus sigma ls by sigma lv. Okay, again you can also do the similar thing in the y direction as well. You can again you'll again end up with a relation in terms of this several surface tension coefficient for different interfaces. But the point is, we have not, and for the scope of this course, we are not going to dive deep into the implications of Young's equation and resultant equations that we derive from it. But one of the equations, important equations that arise from this Young's equation is your expression for excess pressure. Okay, I think I made a blunder. It's not excess, it's excess. Okay, so it's ex the expression for excess pressure. Okay, so given that there are two curved surfaces having a radius of curvature given by r1 and r2, then the excess pressure engulfed by that curved surface will be given by sigma times 1 by r1 plus 1 by r2, where r1 and r2 denotes the radius of curvature for this curved surface. Okay, so in the case of a spherical bubble, now we'll look into some special cases which will again, we will not, for the sake of this particular basic fluid mechanics course, we will not deal into these complex surfaces which have different surface of curvatures. So we will usually not discuss about it, and we will not ask those questions in the exams as well. Okay, for this course of course. But what will be important is the special cases that we will discuss today. So there are three special cases actually, and two of which I have discussed here now, and one I think there's one question in the today's problem solving part. Okay, so there are two special cases. For first, the case of spherical bubble or a spherical droplet, and second is the case of spherical bubble. Okay, so there are two different cases. So for example, if there's a liquid droplet, okay, which will have only one surface that separates your liquid and vapor interface, in that case the surface tension coefficient is used to find your excess pressure within the liquid droplet to maintain its shape. Okay, so let me just give an example. Like for example, there must be a excess pressure acting within the surface of this liquid so that it is able to sustain its shape. You may ask why. For example, if the pressure outside the bubble is or liquid droplet is higher than the pressure inside the this liquid droplet, what will happen is it will try to deform its shape. Okay, I think it's very easily understandable. So in order to retain its shape, it has to exert an additional pressure greater than the surrounding pressure, which is usually the atmospheric pressure in this case, if there is a liquid vapor interface, to maintain its shape. And the expression for the excess pressure, that's why we use delta P, not P absolute. This excess pressure delta P is given by 2 sigma by r, where sigma is your surface tension coefficient for this particular liquid, which in this case might be water, and r is the radius of this particular spherical droplet. Okay, but in the I'm sorry, but in the case of a spherical bubble, for example of a soap bubble, you can realize that instead of having a single interface, there is actually two interfaces. Like the bubble will have a finite thickness, right? Like inside also there is air, outside also there is air. Okay, but still it is able to retain its particular shape. Okay, you can consider it as a spherical shell in a way. So that's why, because of a finite thickness, it will tend to have two layers. Okay, it will tend to have two layers that are able to exert the surface tension forces to maintain its particular shape, and that's why the net surface tension force required to sustain the spherical shape of a particular bubble, in this case I've taken example of soap bubble, would be twice the force required to sustain the shape of a spherical droplet. Okay, that's the basic difference. If it's a bubble, it's 2 times the excess pressure of the spherical droplet. Okay, again, it's a very crude approximation sometimes that we make, like we are not considering the effect of thickness of the bubble in this expression, but for a basic understanding and for a basic understanding of the concept of surface tension and the difference between the excess pressure for liquid droplet and a liquid bubble, I think it works quite well, and this is what we will ask, this is what would be asked in your exams. Okay, and unfortunately for my case as well, I have not dived deep into the effects of surface tension and how these expressions change for complex cases, because my field of study is not related to this right now. So I'm not able to find some elaborate examples or cases where the expressions might change. Okay, so I'm sorry for that, but for most of the cases and most of the even competitive exams as well, the knowledge of these two expressions is quite enough. Okay, so if you want to learn more, I will of course encourage all of you to like look into special books, textbooks and sources in the internet, but for now unfortunately I do not know, so please forgive me for that. Okay, for now you can just be happy with these two expressions, I guess. So that's what this is what I wanted to explain here, like the concept of excess pressure. So I think I've already did, so I think we can skip this part. If you want, we can again discuss it. Basically, like the surface tension forces will tend to pull the surface of the bubble or the droplet in this particular direction, like basically trying to get a shape that is for a particular area, it should a surface area, it should have the smallest volume. Okay, and that is sphere in this case. So it will tend to achieve a shape of a sphere, and the inside pressure has to be greater than the outside pressure so that the shape has been maintained. Otherwise, if it is higher than the inside pressure, it will basically deform the shape and the bubble surface will cannot be retained. Okay, so yeah, and there's one more basic concept, that for equilibrium conditions the surface energy has to be minimized. Basically, the shape of the object, or what to say, has to be attained in a way that contains the least surface energy. Okay, so just give me some time. Like, I think for now I'm not getting a particular scenario where from which I can give a particular example for this, but maybe I will get back to you when in the problem solving part. Okay, once we are discussing some problems, while you are solving the problem, I will try to give you an example for this. Okay, I just missed this statement. I wrote it, but I missed an example for this. So sorry for that. Okay, so I hope it is clear till now. The next topic, is there any doubt? You might, if you want, you can ask, since there are very few topics today. So, is there any doubt? Otherwise,
Hello, sir.
yes. Sure.
I just wanted to ask, like, shall we ask the doubt in between the session, or say, shall we ask the doubts at the end of the session?
Okay, so what type of doubts you have?
I mean, in general, related to the topic.
Oh, like if you think that it's better to ask now, you can ask now. Like for example, yeah, if you any doubt particular to this specific diagram, you might ask now. But if you feel that asking that particular doubt might interrupt the flow of the session, you might stop for a while, and like for example, now right now I have stopped and encouraged the doubt, then you might ask. So if there's
Okay, sir.
any
Then
doubt,
better way I will ask the doubts at the end of the session.
okay, but still, if you doubt till now, you might ask regarding surface tension. I think I've clarified it as much as I can, but if there's any doubt, you might ask. I will try to look into it while you're solving some problems. Then, like, it will be better for me as well. You might ask. Let me try.
Oh, okay, sir. Just go like little previous figure,
Okay.
previous one.
Yes.
Again, little up.
Okay.
Okay, fine, sir. This the droplet on the left hand side.
Huh.
Sigma LS, sigma SV, and sigma LV.
Yeah.
So these are the, like, if we take down certain length of the fluid element, then there will be the force due to the surface tension acting.
Yes.
And if active will get formed, so the horizontal forces are get balanced.
Yes. Horizontal forces are balanced, right, by this equation. Yes.
If we take down the summation of Fy, so like there is only one component, like sigma LV has a vertical component.
Yes.
But in the it has to get balanced by reverse vertically downward force also.
So that's the thing. That's like that you can assume that has been done by the action of force of attraction between this liquid bubble and the particular surface. That's the thing. That will balance out, right? There has to be some additional forces that are interaction between the liquid bubble and the surface.
So the attractive force you are saying.
Yes.
But in a case if the angle is obtuse, for example glass and mercury.
Yes, that we will see. That we will see.
In that case, it won't be any attractive force since it will be repulsive force. Since the angle of contact is obtuse.
Yeah, so then you see, right? Then the shape of the bubble also changes, right? It becomes something like this, right? The meniscus shape changes in that scenario.
No, my question was that, like, sir, even Chakraborty sir explained that in his lecture.
Yeah.
Like the vertical force is get balanced by the weight of the fluid element over there.
Okay.
But I'm not like it's not easy to digest that thing since the force is acting only on the surface, so only on the molecules of the surface. So the weight of the liquid droplet don't come into the action. That's what I personally feel.
Okay. Yes. So the thing is, thanks for that. Again, as I mentioned that, unfortunately for me as well, and I think precisely for anyone who is taking this basic course, like they usually don't dive deep into this kind of topics, primarily because the Young's equation, like we will use this equation to derive this, right, and other expressions, but because of that, I think it's better like if I look into it a bit more. Okay, as I mentioned, I have not looked into it a bit more, so of course there might be an element of doubt, but I'll try to look into it maybe in the next class. If you attend, we'll try to clarify that.
Fine, sir.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Okay. Okay then, so let us continue our discussion on the surface tension forces. So one of the implications of surface tension forces we have already discussed, the sustenance of the shape of this spherical droplet and spherical bubble. Okay, so another important, very important implication of these surface tension forces arise in the case of capillary rise. Okay, so for example, if you recall, you might have, I'm sure that all of you might have done this experiment in your chemistry lab or physics lab, I'm not sure, that where you insert a small capillary tube inside uh, in, uh, inside a liquid surface, usually it's water. You'll see that the level of water rises slightly above the capillary tube. Okay, so that's one of the, what to say, applications or implications of the surface tension forces that give rise to this kind of like seemingly unnatural phenomenon, but you will see that this is completely natural because of the adhesive forces between the liquid molecules and the surface of the glass. Okay, and one of the very important implications of this uh, surface tension forces, or particularly in the case of capillary rise, is the ascent of sap, like that has been already discussed thoroughly by Professor Chakraborty, that for example in the case of roots of the trees. Okay, so it is by the action of these capillary forces that they are able to absorb the water from the soil up towards like from the soil in the upward direction to the tree. Okay, but again you might ask, who are experts in biology, they will say that yeah, that's true, but actually if you see this absorption of water from the soil to the upper parts of the tree is being driven by the transpiration. Of course that's the main driving factor, but in the case if transpiration is not that much like relevant, that will drive the like I will say that ascent of sap also plays a quite important role to extract the water out from the soil to the through the roots to the upper parts of the plant. Okay, but it's the transpiration, that is the evaporation, or transpiration if you recall is basically the evaporation or the absorption of water from the leaves or the surface to the atmosphere, that drives this absorption of water from the soil to the plants. Okay, so again sorry for this elaborate discussion on biology, I think none of you might be quite interested, but it's important to know the applications. Okay, and of course there may be several other applications, industrial, experimental, academia research, that might be there. Unfortunately my research is not on this, so I cannot give you elaborate examples. I will limit myself to the examples that were taken by Professor Chakraborty. Okay, so with that let us continue. Yeah, so we see that in the case of water. Okay, first we take the case of water. We see that this is the container that we have in our hand, and this is the capillary tube. Okay, I've exaggerated the thickness of the capillary tube very much. So actually that's not the case. It will be like almost near to the, I would say it will be very thin. Okay, it will be very thin. So diameter of only say 0.5 millimeter. Okay, like that. Okay, even lesser than that, 0.25 millimeter might be, that might be diameter of the capillary tube. Okay, but I've exaggerated it so that I can just show you the derivations that are relevant to this topic. So we'll have that in the case of water, we'll see that once the capillary rise has occurred, that the water has risen into the capillary tube because of the adhesive forces between the liquid and the surface of the glass. In this case, like if the capillary tube is made of glass, the surface will be of glass. We see that the interface between the liquid, that is water in this case, and air is in the form of a to say submerged, I'm not getting a submerged dome, or it's basically a spherical shape that is, basically it's a concave shape. Okay, it's a of concave shape. I forgot the words, I'm sorry for it. It's a concave shaped interface, and this interface is also sometimes known as meniscus. Okay, so the shape of the meniscus in this case is of concave shape. Okay, so you will see like why that occurs, and as one of the students rightly pointed out, in the case of mercury, the meniscus shape will change because of the angle of difference in angle of contact between the interface and the glass surface. Okay, that will change the shape of meniscus, but for this case In the case of water, we get the meniscus shape to be concave. Okay. Yeah. So let us just draw the free body diagram of this particular case. Like we'll just zoom it out here and we'll draw the free body diagram. So consider this blue line to be the surface of the meniscus. Then the contact angle between the surface and the vertical is given by theta. Okay, so this is the contact angle, basically the angle made by tangent to the interface with the vertical. So that's the contact angle. So by simple geometry, we'll say that this angle would be equal to this angle. And now if you just balance out the forces, so I've done it a bit below. So I hope the diagram is clear. Okay, so R, capital R here would be the radius of the capillary tube. Okay, and this R is actually the surface of is the radius of curvature of this particular meniscus. Okay, the small r, and theta is your contact angle, and Pg would be the pressure from the gaseous side, and PL is the pressure from the liquid side. Okay, I think the terminologies are clear. Then I think we can proceed. So again, since this if we consider it to be a cylindrical shaped capillary tube, then the radius of curvature of both the both R1 and R2 would be same. Okay, because it will generate a spherical basically hemispherically shaped interface. So it will have R1 will be equal to R2. Okay, which is small r in this particular case. So we'll have delta P as 2 sigma by r. Okay, similar to the case of the spherical droplet, because there's only one interface in this case, this one interface, right? The liquid and the solid, liquid and the gaseous interface. Then we see that this r can be written as, or r cos theta in this case will give you capital R. So we can write r as capital R by cos theta. Okay, so if you substitute this r in terms of the geometrical dimension that you will have from the diameter of the capillary tube, you can write delta P to be 2 sigma cos theta by r. I'm sorry, and this delta P would be equal to the pressure generated or attained by the rise of this liquid column. Okay, so whatever is the pressure achieved by this liquid column, that would be equal to delta P. Okay, so we'll have 2 sigma cos theta by r is equal to rho g h. Okay, or h, the capillary rise, will be given by 2 sigma cos theta by rho g r. Okay, and for most of the cases this expression works quite well, even if the contact angle is obtuse. Of course, Professor Chakraborty has taken special cases where the expression has been like changed a bit. So I'll get back to it, but let us just be here for now. So yeah, so this expression actually works quite well. Like if the angle is obtuse in the case of say mercury, for example, the angle is obtuse, so you'll see that H will become negative, basically showing you a capillary depression. Okay, so you see that the capillary rise H depends on the contact angle theta, the radius r of the capillary tube, the types of liquid. Of course, if the liquid forms an obtuse angle, or if it's a hydrophilic type of liquid, that or if the liquid is not having any kind of attractive forces between the surface. So basically the cohesive forces between the liquids are higher than the adhesive forces. This basically they act as hydrophilic surfaces. So in that cases it will depend on that as well. Okay, it will also depend on the miscibility of the fluids, if at all there are two fluids interacting with each other. And finally the surface roughness. Okay, so if the surface is very rough, for example, if I go back here, the surface is very rough, in that case again the capillary rise will be affected, because the fluid that will rise has to undergo like much more resistance because of the surface roughness. Okay, so in most of the scenarios, for example in this particular expression, we are not considering these two cases. We are limiting our discussions to only these cases, because because these two are dependent with each other, and r of course is a parameter already given here. Okay, so that's what we're discussing. But these two also plays a role, but again we are not discussing here, and for this course we'll just limit ourselves to this particular expression. Okay. And as I was mentioning, so there might be scenarios where the adhesive forces between the glass surface and the liquid might be lesser than the cohesive forces between the liquid molecules. Basically, in that scenarios, we can consider that those surfaces are like our example. For example, even the case of water as well. If water is put in around a surface that is hydrophilic, like they do not interact with water surfaces, then we can essentially say that this exam or this expression is valid, where the adhesive forces between the surface of the capillary tube and the liquid is lesser than the cohesive forces between the liquid molecules. And these scenarios, I will just keep the one parameter same, that is we are considering glass as our surface for our capillary tube. In that case, these kind of scenarios arise when we change the liquid from water to mercury. Okay, so this is a very typical experiment. I think this also you might have done in your chemistry and physics lab, where you see the capillary depression in the case of mercury. Like if you put the same capillary tube here in this, for example, if you just substitute this liquid of mercury, you will see that instead of a capillary rise, you will see there will be a capillary depression, like the liquid level will go down inside the capillary tube, and you will get a meniscus of this shape. That is, you will get a convex shaped meniscus. Okay. And in that case, the capillary depression can be given by this expression. Okay, and in this case, Professor Chakraborty has essentially like substituted this delta P to be rho Hg minus rho W by G. But for most of the cases, since rho Hg is much higher than rho W, you can just disregard this. So we will get the capillary rise as 2 sigma cos 180 minus theta by rho Hg Hr. Okay, rho Hg Gr, where rho Hg is the density of your mercury. Okay, I'm just considering a case of mercury here. Again, there will be already several examples and scenarios, and you can just several permutation combinations where like you can get different expressions, but these are two specific cases that we are discussing. Okay, so again here the expression, the only difference it will make is that this will give you basically a positive value of H. Okay, if the angle is obtuse, this will become positive, you will give a positive value of H. Okay, but even if, and as I already mentioned, you can even use this expression for your capillary depression as well. In that case, only what you will get is your H will turn out to be of negative value. Okay, it will basically tell you that there is a capillary depression. Okay, so that's the only difference. All other things are exactly the same. Okay, so yeah, so is there any doubt till now? Like I'm just waiting. Like if there's any doubt, you might ask. I'll wait for. No, okay, thanks. I will wait for one more minute. Okay. Okay. I'll wait for one more minute, then I'll just discuss the fluid statics part. That would be the last topic for today's discussion, and then and manometry, principal manometry, which is the application of the hydrostatic law. And after that, we will discuss some problems. Then we will call it a day. Okay. Okay. So I think we can proceed. There is no doubt in this. Let us start with one of the fundamental contents of this course. There is fluid statics. So if you remember, I think I didn't mention it till now, but let us just reiterate. So this course can be basically classified into three major subdomains, okay, or three major subtopics. One is fluid statics that we are starting today. Then there is fluid kinematics. And there is fluid dynamics. Okay. So we will discuss all the three scenarios, and till now, if you remember, we are just uh, whirling around the fluid statics part. Okay, and so we have just formally introduced that we are start discussing about fluid statics, but before also till now we have just, if at all we have taken any examples, we have taken scenarios where the fluid is essentially static, that is, it is having no motion, or is undergoing rigid body motion. Okay, so we'll again formally discuss about rigid body motion as well. But and rigid body motion will also come under the paradigm of your fluid statics. Okay, we'll see why. Because there will be no relative motion between the layers of fluids, so no shear forces will arise. So in that case, if there are no shear forces, we can basically categorize those kind of motions under the rigid body motion category. Okay, so I think we will discuss in the next week's class. So broadly speaking, the term fluid statics itself, it means that we will discuss all the kinds of phenomena that arises when the fluid is at rest. Okay, so we look into the motion of the fluid as well as the forces that result or that interact in these kind of scenarios. Okay, so we will not disregard the forces, we will also consider the forces and its implications and the flow that it generates. Okay, so of course there will be no flow, but if there is rigid body motion, again we can consider it as a separate scenario. Okay, so yeah, so we cannot say essentially say that in a fluid is a static condition there are no forces acting. Of course gravity will always be there, so that will again be one of the key factors that governs the fluid statics domain. Second is the fluid kinematics. Okay, so in fluid kinematics we will discuss about fluid in motion, but again we'll disregard the forces that generates the motion. Okay, so basically I can say we will look into the flow visualization part. We will what to say, acknowledge the fluid's motion, but we will not dive deep into understanding what causes this kind of motion. Okay, we will just appreciate the motion and try to understand the fluid motion by using different kind of flow visualization techniques. And the third part, which is the most elaborate and the most important part, is fluid dynamics. So in that case, you will look into fluid in motion and also consider the forces that give rise to this fluid motion. Okay, so that's the basic overview of the entire course, starting with fluid statics. Okay, so I think by now you've got an idea. For fluid statics, the fluid would be at rest or rigid body motion. Okay, so that's the thing. So now you can understand that the primary force that acts would be the normal forces, that is the pressure, and the body force, that is gravity. Okay, so you will see in most of the scenarios this pressure would be balanced, or the pressure gradient will be balanced by the body forces, that is gravity. Okay, so let us take a generalized case. For example, consider this fluid element given by this diagram and labeled as A, B, C, D. Let label its edge as A, B, C, D. So let the edge A be at a position of x and let the edge B be at a position of x plus delta x. Basically the thickness of this, or the length of this fluid element from A to B is delta x, and the height is delta y, and let the width be 1. Okay, unity to simplify our calculations. Okay, so the width in the depth of this paper would be 1. Okay, we can say delta z, let us take delta z to be 1. Okay, so as I mentioned, what other forces will be acting, that is the pressure forces and the gravity, and the body forces. Okay, other forces that are arise from the shear forces will not be considered because of the fluid statics approximation. Okay, so in that case the pressure force that acts along the surface AD, we will just consider force balance along the x direction for the simplicity. So on the surface AD we will have the pressure forces as P times the area would be delta y times this area, so it is delta y times 1. So pressure forces is P times delta y times 1. Okay, if you consider disregard delta, if you disregard 1, it is P times delta y. Similarly, in the face BC, we will know that forces pressure always acts along in the direction of inwards to the surface, like it always acts in the inverse direction pressure. So in that case you will have pressure as P plus dou P by dou X. Okay, just to again, I think I'm speaking new terminology. So dou P by dou X, so dou will basically represent your partial derivatives. Okay, and if there's complete derivative, I will say dp. Okay, dp by dx. So that's the difference I want you to acknowledge. So when I say dou, it will mean that partial derivative with respect to x. Okay, so dou p dou x times delta x times delta y times 1. Okay, so the area remains constant because we are considering a cubical shaped fluid element, so this area remains same, but the difference is in the pressure. Okay, so now you might ask how you got this. Okay, so this again simply obtained by considering your Taylor series expansion. So if you have doubt, you can, I think, just try to look into it in your math text, standard math textbooks, what is Taylor series expansion. So if you take a Taylor series expansion of pressure to, and find, if you want to find the pressure at say a coordinate x plus delta x, then you can write pressure as P plus dou P by dou x delta x plus the second derivative dou square P by dou x square times delta x square by 2 factorial, and this will continue. Okay, so you can check the expression for the Taylor series expansion for a particular function, say f of x plus h, and see that it follows a similar trend. Okay, now then you will be able to correlate. So with that idea in mind, if you just disregard the higher order forces, again you must ask why we disregard higher order forces or higher order components. Basically, if this delta x is very, very small, okay, we consider this element to be small, this delta x delta y tends to 0, so delta x is actually very, very small. So if delta x is small, then say delta x is 0.01, then delta x curve would be very, very smaller than delta x. It will be basically 0.001, right? It will be very, very small. So in order to, and by that approximation, we can say that all the higher order forces will, or higher order terms will have a very, very less contribution to the net change in pressure from say coordinate x to delta x. So we can easily disregard the higher order terms. Okay, so with that approximation, we can write pressure at x plus delta x to be P plus dou P by dou x delta x. Okay, now we look into the expression for the net force balance along the x direction. Again, we have considered the fluid statics approximation, so we consider fluid to be at rest and under rigid body motion. Okay, so let Bx be the net force, body force along the x direction. Okay, then we'll have summation of all the forces along the x direction to be equal to max from the Newton's third law, so Newton's second law, I'm sorry. So we'll have, if we do the force balance, I think it is both diagram and the expression are visible. Okay, so we'll have P times delta y minus P plus dou P by dou x delta x times delta y plus rho times delta x delta y bx. Okay, it was like body force per unit mass, so we can multiply it with the volume or with the mass. Okay, so it is rho times delta x delta y times 1, that will give you the volume. So rho times volume will give you the mass times bx will give you the net body force, would be equal to rho times delta x delta y times ax. M would be your rho delta x delta y. Okay, and times 1, we will consider z coordinate to be 1. Okay, now you might ask why there is an ax term when the fluid is at rest. Okay, I told that we are considering a generalized case where fluid is under rigid body motion. Okay, so when a fluid is at rigid body motion, then there will be an acceleration term. Okay, even though the fluid, there are no shear forces, but the flow will have, the fluid element will have a certain acceleration arising from the rigid body motion approximation. Okay, so if you simplify it further, you will get that minus dou P by dou x plus rho bx is equal to rho ax. Okay, it's the expression of the net, or basically force balance along the x direction. Okay, similarly you will get the exact similar expression along the y and z direction. Okay, you will get dou P by dou y plus rho by is equal to rho ay, and dou P by dou z plus rho bz is equal to rho az, I'm sorry. So you get the same expression along the y and z coordinates as well. Okay, okay, so for the first or very first application of this equation of motion, so let us just mark it red because it's an equation of motion for fluid statics, generalized because we are considering rigid body motion as well. So it is the generalized equation of motion for fluid statics. Okay, so for any fluid statics case, we'll start with this expression. We'll see if the fluid is at complete rest, there is no rigid body motion considered, then this rho x term will be equal to 0, of course. Then basically your pressure gradient will be balanced by the net body force, okay, which is basically the case that we are discussing now. For example, just consider a volume of fluid, okay, and you want to know how the pressure varies from its surface to a particular depth, say h, okay. And again, this surface, this triangle and these two lines represent the free surface, okay. So if you recall, Professor Chakraborty mentioned that this is a very standard notation to denote free surface, okay. And I think for 2 more sessions, I think we will be very well versed with this notation, like free surface. So for now, I think you can take it as a introduction to this, okay. So our task is to understand how the pressure varies from this point A to a certain depth, say point B, which is at a depth of h from the free surface, okay. So our z coordinate is along the in the upward direction, the positive z coordinate is along the upward direction, okay. And your gravitation will always act towards the center of earth, so in this case it will act along the downward direction, okay. So g is in the negative z direction, okay. So if you consider the equation, and of course it's a bulk of fluid at rest, there is no rigid body motion considered, so your acceleration term is equal to 0, okay. So if you consider the equation of motion along the z direction, you will get minus rho p by dou z plus rho bz is equal to 0, because rho ax is equal to 0, okay. Now if we consider the same equation of motion along the x and y direction, what you will get is dou p by dou x is equal to 0. Why? Because the body force along the x and y direction is 0, so we'll get dou p by dou x to be equal to 0 and dou p by dou y equal to 0. So what does this imply? If p is just give me 1 second. It's a very important concept. I think all of you must know it by now, but still if somebody has some confusion, I think it will be clear now. So if a partial derivative of a particular function with respect to a particular function is 0, for example, if dou p by dou x is equal to 0, it basically means that p is not a function of x, okay, but it might be a function of y and z, okay. If you're considering a 3D Cartesian coordinate system, then if dou p by dou x is equal to 0, it will mean that p is not a function of x, okay, and p might be a function of x and y, okay, sorry, y and z, okay. But we see that from the equation of motion along the y direction, we are getting a similar conclusion that dou p by dou y is also equal to 0, okay. So it basically means that p is not a function of x and y, okay, it's not a function of both x and y. So the only thing that it can be a function of, it is a function of z, okay. Of course it might be a constant as well, but from this equation you can easily say that dou p by dou z is not equal to 0, in fact is equal to rho bz, so p is a function of z only. So now what we can do is we can easily convert this partial derivative to a complete derivative from dou p by dou z to dp by dz, okay. So there is a vast difference between these two expressions, okay, not to confuse, don't get confused with these two, okay. Though these two are, they sound same, might seem also same, but they are not the same, okay. It's a partial derivative and it's a complete derivative. So if this is the expression, your life becomes very, very simple. So it basically tells us that any kind of pressure variation is only along the z direction, okay, given, of course, given that your g and rho are constant, okay, which is essentially constant for considerable heights, like most of the height and most of the things where we consider the fluid mechanics problems. So in most of the scenarios, your g will be constant only, okay. So we get p is a function of z only. So from that we can write dp by dz minus dp by dz is equal to rho g. This is what is known as the hydrostatic law, okay, and this will be very, very useful for today's problems that we'll discuss, and also useful, and it also be useful for the principle of manometry, okay. When we discuss problems related to manometer, this will again become quite handy, okay. So our task was, let us not forget, our task was to find the pressure difference between point A and B where B is at a depth of h. Okay, so let us just integrate this equation now. We have our equation, a simple ODE. Now let us just integrate it. So what will be the limits? Okay, so we can write dp is equal to minus rho g dz. So our limits would be from A to B, where our, we know the initial point A, so our final point is B. So our units will be from A to B, and the limits for the depth, that is variation along z, would be from 0. Like if we consider the depth to be 0 here, and of course we are going the negative z direction, so we can take the negative height in that case. So if A is at 0, then B would be at height minus h. Okay, we will take the upper limit of integration as minus h. So if you do the calculations considering, then you will get PB minus PA is equal to integration of rho g dz from 0 to minus h. So minus rho integration of rho g dz integration of 0 to minus h. Okay, this will be your expression. If you just simply integrate it, you will get, if rho g is constant, of course it will be constant for most of the scenarios that we have. So you will get PB minus PA is equal to rho g h, or PB would be equal to PA plus rho g h. So it basically implies that the pressure at point B is higher than pressure at point A, and it is differing by a factor of rho g h. Okay. Then there's also a very brief concept of gauge pressure and absolute pressure and atmospheric pressure. There is a, I think I can give you a good like resource, like for a very basic and simple understanding. There is a very simple diagram in a textbook by R.K. Bansal, fluid mechanics. Like for basic fluid mechanics, and very like, for if you're just interested for competitive exams, I think textbook by R.K. Bansal is good enough for simple numerical problems and that are quite relevant to the competitive exam. So there is a good textbook in that way. But if you want to conceptually be very clear, I won't say that's bad, but I can say there are better books. One of the better books would be the textbook by Prof. Chakraborty himself, the Introduction to Fluid Mechanics and Fluid Machines. So there's a good book, you can just look into that. I think there's a diagram that gives you a good idea of gauge pressure, and absolute pressure, and atmospheric pressure, or scenarios where there's a vacuum as well. So you can look into that. Okay, I think I can leave that as an exercise for you. But a simple relation between gauge pressure and the atmospheric pressure and the absolute pressure is that the P gauge is equal to P absolute minus P ATM. Okay, so the thing is that for most of the fluid mechanics problems, okay, so I think I also took a course of thermodynamics last semester. If any one of you may attended, you might know that. In that case, in those scenarios, when we discuss about pressure, usually if it is not mentioned, we consider the pressure to be absolute pressure. Okay, for most of the calculations actually. Ideal gas law, in these kind of scenarios, we take pressure as absolute pressure. But for fluid mechanics, the scenario is a bit different. Like, unless and until mentioned, for most of the problems, usually the pressure that we usually is mentioned is a gauge pressure. Okay, of course, for the better specifications, the examiners or even the manufacturers will define the pressure unit as is either gauge or absolute. Okay, but for most of the problems, if not mentioned, you can consider the given pressure to be gauge pressure. Okay, and if required, they will mention specifically that it is absolute pressure. Okay, so this is the expression or relation between gauge pressure and absolute pressure. So as I already told you, I gave an exercise. You can look into this and understand it by looking into these two textbooks by R.K. Bansal and Professor Suman Chakraborty. These two textbooks you can refer, and then I think it will be quite clear. They also give some problems that are relevant to it, that will be much more beneficial. But I don't think it's that difficult concept to understand, but still. Okay, so there are two flow devices that we will consider that applies the concept of this hydrostatic law. First is barometer. Okay, so basically if you want to measure the pressure inside this tube. Okay, I'm sorry, I have not looked into the elaborate diagrams or the utilities of barometer. Sorry for that, but just I'm looking into the application of hydrostatic law in the working of barometer. So for example, if you want to measure the vapor pressure inside this particular tube, which is this is the basic structure of a barometer. In that case, you can find that the pressure, I'm sorry, that I think it's the other way around. For example, if you want to measure the pressure outside, the atmospheric pressure P, and if you know the vapor pressure inside, okay, that again is basically dependent on a type of fluid. Okay, so any kind of fluid, for example, water will have a certain vapor pressure at a particular temperature, and again mercury will have a certain vapor pressure at a particular temperature. Depending on that, if you know the vapor pressure, of course if you know the fluid, then you can easily evaluate the atmospheric pressure. Okay, so the higher the pressure, higher will be the rise of the liquid in this particular tube. Okay, so if you just apply the principle of hydrostatic law, you can know that the pressure contained in that particular liquid column is given by rho gh. Okay, so P would be equal to rho gh plus the vapor pressure. Okay, so basically you can write this like that. Okay, and generally the fluid used in barometer is mercury. Again, so oh, sorry for that. Okay, so let us proceed. So this is the last part. I think I might need to zoom out a bit. Okay, I hope it is still visible. It might be a bit small, but I hope it is still visible. Okay, so the last topic of today's discussion is the principle of manometry, which is again a simple application of the principle of hydrostatic law. Okay, so if you recall, I don't know, most of you might have done some experiments in your fluid mechanics labs, like if you are undergoing a bachelor's course in mechanical engineering or even chemical engineering or civil engineering, where you encounter the use of venturimeter. Okay, where you need to find the flow rate through that particular pipe. Okay, so there you might have seen some tubes that are inserted across the length of the venturimeter, which are basically piezometers that are used to find the pressure at the different points in the venturimeter by taking into account the liquid height at that particular piezometer. Okay, so we use the same principle in the case of manometer as well, where the pressure, or basically in this case pressure difference across 2 points in a particular pipe or duct, is measured by calculating the difference in height in the liquid columns. Okay, so that's the basic principle of manometry. Again, you can, depending on your requirement and needs, you can change the fluid that is used in the manometer. Okay, so that's upon the that's the engineer's choice. Like as per requirement, the fluid can be changed. Okay, if you want a very small displacement, then you can use mercury because it has a higher density, so the change in pressure is perceived as a very small displacement in the height. If you want a huge difference, then you might use a fluid of lower density. Again, that also might be someone's requirement. And if you want the measurements to be quite accurate, like if you want a more accurate measurements, then you can use, say, inclined tube manometers. Okay, so there are various, and as an exercise again, you might want to look into different types of manometers that are used in fluid mechanics. Okay, so you might look into textbooks and look into several examples, but in all those cases, again, the concept will remain the same, that the pressure at a particular height or datum is same. If the flow is stationary and the liquids are uniform, okay, or the liquids are not changing, then the height then the pressure above a particular datum or a particular height, reference height, would be the same. Okay, so what I mean is that, for example, first of all, the fluid is stationary. Okay, the fluid is at equilibrium condition, it is not moving. Okay, so that's the first scenario that has to be satisfied. Second is, we are considering the height, or we are considering the pressure difference with respect to a particular reference height, which is known as datum in some case. Okay, datum is DATM. Okay, so we consider this pressure balance across a particular reference height. Okay, and the third is the fluid. If you're considering measuring the liquid, if you're measuring the pressure, then you need to consider the changes in the fluid. Okay, if the liquid is changing from, say, let me mark it. Say point D, say Q. Okay, if liquid is changing from D to Q, then you need to take into consideration the change in the liquid while measuring the pressure across that particular height. Okay, so you cannot say that the pressure from point B to D is just given by rho W. If this is water, of course it's given here. If it's rho water, we cannot say that the pressure from B to D is rho W G times Z2 plus delta H. Okay, you cannot say, you take into account the change in the fluid as well. Okay, so that's the basic concept. Okay, so with that, let us just take this simple example. Okay, so what we have is that there is a flow of water from point A to B. Okay, so you will eventually see that for flow to occur from point A to B, the pressure at point B has to be lower than the pressure at point A. Then only the flow can occur in this particular geometry. Okay, in the case of duct or pipe, for flow to occur, there has to be a negative pressure gradient. Okay, for a favorable flow. So we will have pressure at point B to be lower than pressure at point A. Then only the flow could occur in this direction. Okay. So that's what no. Now what we do is we need to find the pressure difference between point A and point B. Yes, and that's what the basic use of manometer, where you want to find the pressure difference between 2 points in a pipe or duct. Okay. So what we will do is I will choose and this is the configuration or the static configuration of the liquid column, that from point A to C, height is given by Z1. From point B to D, the liquid column, that is for water, is from B to Q, that is Z2, and the liquid that is used for the measuring the pressure difference is your mercury. So mercury is from the reference height of CD to point Q is delta H. Okay, so this is the height of the liquid column, which is mercury in this particular case, from the reference height. Okay, so all of this we have noted down. So now the thing is, since points C and D okay, are at the same level, first point, okay, are the same height or same level, plus the liquid at which we are measuring the height is also the same. Okay, so I am measuring the height of this datum to be at the mercury only. Okay, so here also CD, of course it's a water and mercury interface, but mercury is still there. Okay, so I'm not considering it to be oil or anything else. Okay, so liquid is still remaining the same. So our pressure at point C and pressure at point D would be the same. Okay, since the liquid is also the same. Okay, so these are the conditions that we need to specify before imposing this equation. Okay, PC equal to PD. Okay, so once you have stated it, now everything is very simple. Just measure all the forces now. Okay, all the pressure differences. So PA, pressure at above point C, would be given by PA plus the pressure by this liquid column, right, rho W G Z1. Okay, that is pressure at point C. For pressure at point D, we'll follow the same steps. From point B to Q, you will have PB plus rho W Z2G, plus from point Q to D, you will have pressure delta H times rho Hg times G. Okay, so now if you do the simple manipulations, you will have PA minus PB to be equal to rho W G Z2 minus Z1 plus rho Hg delta H times G. Okay, now Z2 minus Z1 is minus delta H. Okay, from this diagram, so we will have PA minus PB equal to PA minus PB to equal to G times delta H rho Hg minus rho W. Okay, now again if you simplify further, you can write PA minus PB to equal to rho W G times delta H divided times rho Hg divided by rho W minus 1. Okay, again it's a very simple expression, very simple concept. We will take one example today where we will apply the same, and let us see whether you are well versed with it or not. Again, so as I mentioned, you see that the error in the measurement of the pressure is depending on the factor of delta H. So if delta H is very small, then there is a chance that the error might be high. Okay, if delta H is very small, then there can be a lot of error in the reading. Okay, so usually what we wanted to diminish the error, what we want is that we will try to have a bigger difference in the liquid levels. For example, say if I will just take a hypothetical scenario. If the liquid, if delta H was very small, for example, if the height increment was only at this point, okay, then delta is very small. Okay, so there might be a chance that you might end up with some errors in the reading. Okay, because of say the meniscus surface. Okay, there might be some errors that might be occurring while measurement. So to avoid that, what we do is we use the inclined tube manometer, where the manometers are having an inclined shape. So basically the deflection, instead of having a vertical deflection of delta H, we take an inclined deflection of say L and then carry on our measurements. Okay, so that's the very purpose of designing these inclined tube manometers. So if you want, you can look into it, the purpose of the inclined tube manometers and the approximation that are being made to simplify the calculations of pressure difference. Okay, so that's a task that you can do, okay, as an exercise, but that's the very purpose of designing these inclined tube manometers. Okay, so is there any doubt till now? Okay,
No, sir. All
okay,
clear.
okay, thank you. Then let us directly proceed to some oh, I think, okay, so if it's all right, can I just, or can I just unshare the screen for a while? I need to load the question parts. Like for privacy purpose, I want to unshare the screen for a few seconds, then I will reshare the
Yes,
screen.
yes,
Okay.
sir. Please go ahead.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So I hope the screen is visible. Okay. So there are only 6 questions today. Okay, not much because contents are very less. So let us go to the first question. So dimensions of surface tension is, okay, just to reiterate, here F denotes the force, okay, the force dimensions. So what would be the dimension of surface tension? Could you try it out? It's very simple. Remember the, and by surface tension I mean the surface tension coefficient, just to be clear. Option B, okay. Yes. So I think it's quite simple. So I think we should not hover around this question for long. It's absolutely correct. So we know that the surface tension coefficient is given by sigma is equal to F by L. So it's simple dimensional unit. So it's B. Question number 2 is a bit more elaborative. So I think you might need to do some calculations. If a surface tension at water-air interface is 0.0718 Newton meter, how much does the pressure inside a cylindrical jet of water with 4 millimeter in diameter exceed the pressure of the surrounding atmosphere? Okay, so in the case of liquid jets, so we have considered a spherical droplet, a spherical bubble. Other thing is the cylindrical jet. Okay, so in the case of cylindrical jets, the expression for the excess pressure is given by sigma by R. Okay, so I thought that we can introduce this concept from an example, so you can try it out. I think, okay, it's 35.9, yeah, exactly. It's very, very simple actually. Expression is already given. Just substitute sigma is 0.0718. Diameter is 4 millimeter of the liquid jet, cylindrical jet. So radius would be 2 millimeter. Okay, so it is 0.002. So we will get 35.9 Newton per meter square. Okay, very simple. Next question is, I think, again, a very simple application of the concept that we have discussed. So a glass tube of 1 millimeter radius is immersed vertically in a mercury. Okay, density is this. The surface tension of mercury in contact with air is 0.44 Newton per meter, and the area wetting contact angle is 130. There will be 2.12 millimeter capillary rise in glass tube, 2.12 millimeter capillary depression in glass tube, 4.24, it's point. Okay, I need comma, it's 4.24 millimeter capillary rise in a glass tube, 4.24 millimeter capillary depression in a glass tube. So if you recall, I think we can easily eliminate two options already. If it is mercury and glass, you know that there will be a capillary depression. Okay, so option A and option C are eliminated. So only two options are B and C. So you just need to give the numerical value. Okay, just substitute the value of this rho, G, and theta in the expression for h of capillary rise. You'll easily get the answer. Okay, so you might wait for a few 3 minutes, then you can give me the answer. It's very, very simple. Okay, 4.24 depression. Okay, I think that's essentially correct. So just need to do this rho Hg times G times R. Okay, so your 2 times rho sigma is 0.44. Just be consistent with the units. Okay, so it's cos 130. The contact angle is an obtuse angle. Okay, rho Hg is 13,600. G is 9.81, and R would be 1 millimeter or 0.001 meter. So you will do this, you will get value of minus 4.24 millimeter or a capillary depression of 4.24 millimeter. Okay, so correct. Let us go to question number 4. Okay, a static fluid can have option A non-zero normal and shear stresses, option B zero normal stress and zero shear stress, option C non-zero normal stress and zero shear stress, option D zero normal stress and non-zero shear stress. Okay, it seems like it's a simple permutation combination of the two concepts. So option C. Okay, so it is said that a static fluid can have non-zero normal stress and zero shear stress. Absolutely correct. Why? Because we already discussed that in the case of fluid statics, the pressure forces that are the normal stress components are relevant. They will be there and they are balanced by your body forces. In our case, this is gravity. Okay, but since there is no relative motion between the layers of fluid in the case of fluid statics, no shear stress can arise because there is no angular deformation of the fluid elements. That's why the only correct option is that there can be a non-zero normal stress because pressure are there and the shear stress would be zero. Okay, so that's correct. So option number 5, yeah, it's very unfortunate that it is distributed into 2 pages, but the question is the piezometric head in a static liquid. Okay, again, just to reiterate, so there are piezometric head. Okay, it's said that the questions are framed in a way that topics are not discussed first but jargons are thrown beforehand. Okay, so sorry for that, but piezometric head basically means the sum of your pressure head given by P divided by rho g. Okay, I'll also tell why it is called head. Okay, plus your potential head. Okay, potential energy head, it is Z in this case. So why it is called head? Because it basically gives you a unit in terms of height. Okay, so that's why, just as a general norm or terminology, these are been represented as or named as heads. Okay, again there's a kinetic energy head as well. Okay, which will basically be v square by 2g. Okay, but for piezometric head basically means the summation of pressure head given by P by rho g plus the potential energy head, that is Z. Okay, again, and Z is being measured from a particular reference level. Okay, so the question here asked is that the piezometric head is for a static fluid, the sum of P by rho g plus Z, that is the height from a particular reference level. Options: A, remains constant at all the points in the liquid. Option B, increases linearly with the depth with a free surface. Option C, decreases linearly with the depth below a free surface. Option D, remains constant only in a horizontal plane. Okay, it looks like option B and D are correct. Let me just read. I think this chat app. Okay, it says it looks like B and D are correct. Okay, most probably option D. Okay, so you're saying that remains constant only on horizontal plane. Okay, so it's a nice, actually very nice try. Okay, I won't say whether it's correct or not, just for the sake of everyone to participate. So what I will do is I'll give you 2 more minutes. I think that's fair. I'll give you 2 more minutes. Just try to the best practice is just draw a diagram. Okay, draw a diagram and try to find out, like, you already know, right, this diagram. So A and D are correct. Okay, A and D are correct. Okay, so let us look into it. Okay, so but let me give you a what just what to say. uh, for example, let us say, okay, so if you tilt your surface, okay, I think if you tilt your container, okay, what can you say about the free surface? Will the free surface remain horizontal? Okay, for gases rho may not be a constant, so option D is correct. Okay, so the thing is, it's considered, they're saying liquid only, static liquid, so let us just consider liquid. Okay, let us not bring in gases, but it's a valid point. But for these cases, okay, we are just considering liquid. Okay, so if you remember, I mentioned something about your inclined manometer. Okay, it's again very unfortunate we're discussing things that are not discussed thoroughly, but again it's important to know. So if you see, if you tilt your beaker, okay, where the fluid is there, your interface or the free surface will actually become something like this, right? It will remain horizontal irrespective of how you tilt your container. Okay, so you'll see that eventually the pressure difference, or the pressure that varies from the free surface to a particular head, depends on the free surface. Okay, on front of, and is measured from the free surface. And since the free surface remains horizontal irrespective of your plane, it does not matter if the plane is tilted or not. The pressure difference is always measured in terms of the vertical height. Okay, not the horizontal or slant height. You will eventually see, when you see the inclined tube manometer, I'll just give an example. Like in the inclined tube manometer as well, even if you are considering a length of say delta L to look into a deflection of the fluid height. Okay, see, for manometers, if I go back to your, sorry again, wrong assignment, sorry. Yeah, so in the case of these manometers, you see that deflection is vertical, right? That's why the pressure you measure as rho g delta H. Okay, the same thing is in the case of inclined tube manometers. Again, instead of the deflection being a vertical deflection, you will observe the deflection to be delta L, so that the deflection is higher, like the slant deflection would be higher than the vertical deflection, right? So just to make the deflection higher, we use a slant tube, so that we can, the deflection can be increased and the error related to the deflection can be reduced. Okay, but the eventual measurement of the pressure difference is measured in terms of the vertical deflection, which is delta L sine theta. You will see delta S and then becomes equal to delta H. Okay, so the pressure difference is always measured in terms of the vertical height. Okay, not the slant or the horizontal surface. So slant, not the slanted plane. Okay, so if even if your plane changes, tilts, the pressure measurement will only depend on the vertical height, not the alignment of your, or the inclination of your plane. Okay, from which, or from which, on which the liquid is contained. Okay, so that's important. Okay, so you're correct to point out both A and D, but the more accurate answer would be option A, that it remains constant at all points in the liquid. Okay, it does not depend on the whether the plane is horizontal or tilted. Okay, it remains constant at all the points in the liquid. Okay, and let us see why it occurs. Okay, so if I go back here, this was the example that I took, basically, like take 2 points in the flow. Okay, take 2 points in the domain, point A and B. Okay, these are the points, point A and B. So the pressure head, that is P by rho g, is given by from free surface to point A, right? That is this head, that is HA, where HA is PA by rho g. Okay, or basically if you do PA, pressure at point A would be rho g HA. Okay, so HA would be PA by rho g, that is the pressure head. Okay, and the datum head, that is, if you take the bottom surface of this container to be your datum, then the potential head would be given by the difference from point A to the datum, that is ZA. Okay, it should be ZA. I'm sorry, I labeled it wrong. So it is ZA. Similarly, now if you consider point B, you'll see that since the point B is at a greater depth than point A, then the corresponding pressure head for point B would be higher than the point A. Okay, so it will be PB by rho g, and since pressure at point B is higher than pressure at point A, so HB would be higher. But since point B is at a lesser distance from the reference height datum, so the potential head corresponding to point B would be smaller, that is ZB. Okay, that would be ZB. And now if you just find the total sum of the head, that is pressure head and the piezometric head, sorry, pressure head and the potential head, so HA plus ZA would be H. Again, the pressure head at point B, that HB plus ZB would be H. Okay, so it will remain same. And again, if you just, even if you modify your geometry, you will see that eventually that this piezometric head will remain, in fact it will remain the same. Okay, even if, like, even in the case of your, there are scenarios or problems related to tilted venturimeters, right? In these kind of problems also, we measure the pressure head and the potential head, but you'll see the piezometric head remains the same. Okay, of course the difference might be generated because of the kinetic energy head, but the piezometric head remains constant. Okay, so let us go to the last question. It's a bit more elaborate one, so I think it will need a bit more time for discussion. and to derive. Okay, so it's a bit complicated.
Sir,
Okay, sure. Yeah.
sir, what was the answer to the last question? Like
Wait,
A or D?
A, it remains constant at all points, irrespective of the whether it is horizontal or not.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the last question is question C. So it's a bit more elaborate. So we just considered a single YouTube manometer in our example, but it is a bit more, I would say, a bit more complicated. But if you know the principles, it would be quite easy. Okay, so let us just look into it. Okay, I will mark the important points. A water in a tank is pressurized by air, and the pressure is measured by a multi-fluid. Okay, there are two fluids now. Multi-fluid manometer shown in the figure below. Tank is located at a mountain at an altitude of 1400 meter, where the atmospheric pressure is 85.6 kilopascal. Okay, so the since it is an altitude, so air would be thinner, so the pressure is 85.6 kilopascal. Okay, determine the air pressure of tank if H1. I hope the diagram is clear now. So H1 is 0.1 meter, H2 is 0.2 meter, and H3 is 0.35 meter. Okay, take the densities of water, oil, and mercury to be: water's density is 1000 kg per meter cube, oil's density is 850 kg per meter cube, and mercury's density is 3600 kg per meter cube. Okay, it's rho Hg. Okay, so we need to find the pressure difference between point A and point B. Okay, so I will give you, say, 6 minutes. You can take 6 minutes, in fact, no problem. Try it out. I'm sure that it seems it seems a bit difficult for now, but just try it out a bit. Oh, options. I have to zoom out then, I guess. So these are the options: A, B, C, and D. Try it out. If you get the right answer, I think then I will encourage you to share how you did it for others to know as well. That would be a better practice. Okay, so look into it. Let us know. Yeah. I hope the question is clear. It's quite simple. Just recall that you need to choose a particular reference frame, and from that you can measure the weight of the liquid columns and then tell whether it is same or not. Okay, so just so you need to find pressure at point 1 actually, because P2 is already known. It is the P atmospheric, which is 85.6 kilopascal. So let us try out. Okay, so I think let's try to look into the solution. Okay, so zoom out a bit more. Okay, so what I do is I choose my datum here to be at this point. Okay, so let me go back. Sorry. So I choose my datum to be the interface between the oil and mercury. Okay, so the green fluid is mercury, red one is oil, blue is air, blue is water. Okay, so it is given that the atmospheric pressure at point 2 is 85.6 kilopascal, H1 this is 0.1, H2 is your uh, uh, 0.2 meter, and H3 is 0.35 meter. Okay, and that is a given. So what I will do is I will try to first find the pressure at this point. Okay, this oil and mercury interface. Okay, since I know that since this fluid is same, this is mercury, this is also mercury, so I can say that pressure at these 2 points will be the same. Okay, so we'll have at this point we will have pressure as P2 plus rho hg times h rho hg times height times gravitational acceleration. Okay, so we have 85.6 plus 30,600 times 0.35 times 9.81, that is 85.6 plus 46.7, this is 132.3 kilopascal. There is a pressure at the mercury and the oil interface. Okay, now the issue arises at this next. If I take this as a datum, then there is no reference between point between your since these two fluids are not the same, so I cannot say that the pressure at, if I say this is the pressure, then I cannot say that this pressure would be equal to the pressure at this interface. Okay, so to do that, what I need to do is I need to take into account the fact, take into account of the fact that the fluid has been changed from at this point, right? Since this interface is not at the same as this interface, there is no mercury here, so I cannot say that the pressure at this point can be the same as pressure from point A to B. Otherwise, we can have just written pressure at say point 1 to be P1 plus rho W times H1 plus H2. Okay, if the interface problem would not have been there, we would have easily written it something like that. But since the interface is not the same, we have to understand a different, we have to take it, understand in a different way. Okay, so what for that what we do is we need to take into account that from from here to here, from this point to this point, like the pressure can be considered to be the by the fluid covering this area. So it would be, in this case, the pressure is given by your pressure at by oil. Okay, so here since the fluid is oil, so your pressure would be rho oil GH1. Okay, I'll come back here if there's any confusion. Let us look into it. So we'll have pressure to be rho oil G times H1 plus the pressure from this region. Okay, there is rho WGH2, so pressure would be rho WGH2. Okay, so once you do it, that was my way of doing. I will also show the other way, that's other way that is given in the solution. I will also show the other way, but that was my logic, that if we consider this as the datum, then we just consider these two different fluids, and that should be equal to the pressure here. Okay, so from that we got that P air to be equal to 132.3, that was pressure at this point, like this P air plus the pressure because of the oil column at height H1 and pressure due to the water column at point H2 would be equal. Okay, so I got 132.3 minus 1000 times 9.81 times 0.1. Okay, 0.1 was the height H1. Okay, oh no. Oh, I'm really sorry. That's why I thought I I was mixing it up. Okay, so I think what I will do is I'm again sorry for the confusion. I don't know, I found the logic and the answer was correct, but it seems that uh, let me just look into it. Okay, just give me 1 minute. I actually did it, but not able to get grasp it properly. Okay. H2 is 0.2. Sorry. Okay. I think the better practice would be just to go from interface to interface. This again one way to look into it. So okay. So in this kind of tube, okay, I will get back to this answer. Okay, I actually did it with some logic and found the correct answer, but I'm not able to correlate it now. Okay, sorry for that confusion. But let us look into it. Like there was another way that was pointed out, and I think there's a much easier way. That is, if there are several layers of liquid in this kind of series of U-tube manometers, for that what you do is you need to just consider the concept of going up and down the manometer. Okay, so if from a particular reference point, if you are going down to measure the pressure, then the pressure will increase. Okay, and if you are going up, then the pressure would decrease. Okay, so that's the basic concept. Okay, and in this kind of scenarios, the problem of the interface being at the same liquid is not there. Okay, so you just need to go up and down and then find the pressure. Okay, so what we will do is, let us do it. Okay, sorry for the confusion, let us just follow that path. I thought I will use this datum concept, but I think I'm not able to implement it properly. Maybe I will get back it after I solve this. Okay, so I thought, since we are going from, let us go from point 2 to point 1 to find the pressure. Okay, so we need to find the pressure at this oil and mercury interface. Okay, so since these are the same height and the liquid is same, so pressure at this point will be same as pressure at this point. Okay, so pressure at this point would be P2 plus rho g H3. Okay, so that that's quite clear. So we'll have P2 times rho Hg. This, from this we got 85.6 plus 37,600 times 0.35 times 9.81. You got 132.3 kilopascal. Okay, so that is the pressure at the mercury and the oil interface. So now what we do is, now since I know that pressure at this point would be the same as this point because of that fact that the interface at this and this point are the same, so what I need to do is I need to find the pressure at this point. Correct. So I need to now move up the manometer or move up the reference point. As I already told you, if you move up the manometer, then the pressure will decrease. Okay, so with that idea, what I'll do is, now I need to subtract the pressure because of oil, the oil column across height H2, from the pressure at this oil and oil and mercury interface. Okay, so let us find that out. So the pressure because of the oil column at height H2 is given by rho oil times G times H2, or 850 times 9.81 times 0.2, because H2 is 0.2. You get delta P oil as 1.67 kilopascal. So the pressure at this interface, the oil and water interface, will be pressure at this point, that was 132.3 kilopascal, minus the pressure at by this liquid column, by the column of oil. So from that you get P at oil and water interface to be 132.3 minus 1.67, or 130.6 kilopascal. Okay, so I hope it is clear till now, right? So now this is the point where we have reached in the manometer. Now what we need is that we want the pressure at this point. Correct. So if we consider our datum to be, let me just draw it like this. Now if you want our datum to be here, like if we take, because since our reference point is at this point, so if you want our datum to be here, so now again to find the pressure at point 1, we need to again go up. Correct, because we need to find the pressure at that point. So pressure at that point would be pressure at the interface of oil and water minus the pressure that is being generated by the liquid column for height H1, that is what the liquid in this case is water. So if now again, since we need to go find pressure at this point, we need to go up the reference point. So again we need to subtract the pressure from this water column. So to do that, you will have P here would be 130.6, that is the pressure at the oil and water interface, minus rho W G H1, where H1 is the height from this column. Okay, so if you do that, you will get P here to be 130.6 minus rho WGH1, or 130.6 minus 1000 times 9.1 times 0.1, or 129.6 kilopascal, which is almost equivalent to 130 kilopascal. Okay, so that's how that's this actually a better practice, that you change your reference point from one point to another, because there are multiple fluids, so you need to choose the datum in a way that the fluid and the interface are the same. Okay, so that's why we cannot go from this particular case, because the fluid at this and this interface are not the same. Okay, so I was not able, I don't know how I did actually. I will just look into it once, then maybe I'll clarify later, but I think this way is much more better for this kind of problems. Okay, so I hope this was clear. If there is doubt in this method, you can ask. I can repeat it, or else we can end it for today. Okay. So is it fine how we got 130 kilopascal?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the only doubt that was remaining was regarding Young's equation. So again, I told that we are not experts in that particular field for some reason, like this is a basic part. So since we are not looking into surface tension research, I have not looked into it. My personal, I personally didn't look into it, but if required, I will just look into it once and see what would happen if there's mercury instead of a liquid that has a adhesive force between the surface and the liquids. So I just look into it once. Okay, okay, okay then. So if it's alright, then we can end it for today, and thank you. Let us meet next week. Okay,
Sir,
sure, yeah.
so can we have a bit of discussion about some of the questions that we have on our side?